I grew up in a quiet Connecticut suburb, where nothing exciting ever seemed to happen. Our backyard had an old oak tree, massive and perfect for climbing. When I was 8, my dad and older brother Kyle built a treehouse in it. 2 levels, wooden walls, and a rope ladder. Everything a kid could want. At first, it was the coolest thing ever. Kyle and I would spend hours up there reading comics, eating junk food, spying on the neighbors. But over time, I started using it less. Something about it felt different when I was alone, like I was being watched. Kyle noticed. I stopped going up there and started teasing me for it. He said I was scared that the treehouse was haunted, cursed even. I told him he was full of it, and he just smiled. He said, "One day, I'm gonna prove it to you." A few months later, during summer break, he dared me to sleep in the treehouse overnight. I laughed it off at first, but agreed mostly out of pride. I told him I'd last till morning. "No problem." Kyle raised an eyebrow and said, "We'll see." I packed my sleeping bag, a flashlight, and my walk. It was warm out, and the sky was clear. I climbed up before sunset, waved to Kyle through the window, and shut the little wooden door behind me. It smelled dusty, like old wood and insulation. As it got darker, the noises outside started to stand out. More rustling, leaves, the distant hum of cars, crickets. But inside the treehouse, it felt quiet, too quiet. The wooden walls seemed to press in around me, holding heat, and something else, something heavier. I lay back, trying to relax. I figured if I could fall asleep, I'd wake up victorious. But then I heard something outside, footsteps on the ladder. They were slow, careful, like someone trying not to be noticed. My heart pounded as I shot upright. The door creaked open slightly, and I heard Kyle's voice. "Good luck." Then the latch clicked shut from the outside. I leaped up and tugged at the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Kyle," I shouted, but there was no reply. My hand remained on the latch as I stood there in silence. It had been sealed off for years, supposedly too unstable to walk on. I stood still, holding my breath, waiting to hear it again. A few seconds passed, and then another sound came, like something being dragged across the floor. I didn't move. I just watched the hatch, afraid to blink. It sounded heavier, this time closer. I aimed my flashlight at the ceiling. The beam flickered as it hit the trapdoor, which now looked slightly ajar. That wasn't how I'd left it. I was certain it had been shut earlier. A faint draft passed through the crack, and then I heard something breathing. I backed into the corner of the treehouse, trying not to make noise. My fingers gripped the flashlight tighter, but my hands were damp. I wanted to call out for Kyle, scream his name, and demand. He unlocked the door, but my throat felt dry. Something about the breathing didn't sound human. It was low and wet, like whoever or whatever was above me had trouble pulling air. The sound moved slightly, as if it were crawling. I couldn't explain it, but I felt watched, like eyes were pressing through the ceiling. I considered banging on the walls, screaming for my parents, but fear silenced me. What if it heard? My light remained fixed on the narrow ceiling opening. The hatch creaked open. Another inch. I held my breath, the beam unwavering. A long moment stretched. Then something moved behind the crack, just a blur, like hair or cloth being pulled back. I couldn't see a face. I didn't want to. I dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor and landed near the wall, spinning its beam in wild circles. My heart was pounding so hard. It hurt. I crouched down and pressed myself against the boards. The breathing above me had stopped, completely replaced by silence. Then I heard a soft knock, one, then two. It came from directly beneath the floorboards, not above. I went cold all over. I hadn't even considered the hollow space under the treehouse. There wasn't supposed to be anything under there, just air and dirt. I stared at the floor, barely blinking, afraid to look away. The knocks came again, this time faster, 5 in a row. Something scraped along the underside like fingernails, dragging on wood. I clamped my hands over my ears and whispered, "It's just a prank." The knocks stopped suddenly, leaving a ringing silence in their place. I stared at the floor so long my eyes burned, afraid that if I looked away, something would come through. I reached for the flashlight, but it was still lying near the wall, its beam now weak. I didn't want to move from the corner. I tried to convince myself. Kyle was behind all of it. Maybe he climbed to the second level and dragged something around, but part of me knew better. Kyle wasn't that quiet. He wasn't that patient. Then came a whisper just above my ear. I couldn't understand what it said, but it was low and fast, like someone repeating the same phrase again and again. My whole body locked up. I hadn't heard anything climbing. I hadn't felt anything next to me. I lunged for the flashlight and swung it wildly, pointing it toward the corner where I thought the whisper came from. Nothing, just empty air and old wood. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely hold the light steady. I kept repeating, "It's not real. It's not real." I crawled to the door, yanking at the latch again. It still didn't move. I pounded on the walls now, yelling as loud as I could. No one answered. The only response I got was a low groan from the ceiling above, like pressure shifting. Something was still up there. I backed away again and stayed near the window, hoping someone in the house might see me. But all the lights were off. Now, the kitchen light I'd seen earlier was gone. I couldn't tell how late it was, but it felt like I'd been in there for hours. I turned to face the center of the treehouse again, and that's when I saw it just for a second, something peeking down from the trapdoor opening. Not a face exactly, but the outline of one too long, too narrow. It vanished. The moment I saw it, I didn't scream. I just slid down against the wall and waited. I stayed awake the rest of the night, flashlight gripped tight, not daring to look at the ceiling again. Eventually I must have passed out. When I woke up, it was daylight, and the door was wide open. Kyle was sitting at the base of the tree, looking pale. He swore he unlocked the door an hour after he shut it, but I never came down. He said he even climbed up to check, but couldn't get the hatch open. He didn't say what else he saw. I haven't gone near the treehouse since. Neither has Kyle. Last I heard, my dad was planning to tear it down this fall. I honestly hope he does, but part of me wonders what they'll find if they open that second level. If you enjoyed the story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I stayed at my cousin Jeremy's place last summer while my apartment was under renovation. He lived in a quiet part of Vermont, tucked away near the woods, with barely any neighbors nearby. The backyard was huge, with this old rickety tree house at the edge of the property. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. One night we were out back, having beers. When I brought out the tree house again, I asked if he'd mind me checking it out sometime. He shrugged and said, "Go for it. Just don't stay too long after dark." I thought he was joking, but his tone was weirdly flat. I went up the next morning with a flashlight in my phone to take pictures. The ladder creaked like it was seconds from breaking, but I made it up inside. It was dusty, cramped, and smelled like old rope. There were broken planks, a rusted lantern, and what looked like a kid's baseball glove in the corner. I didn't stay long, just enough to satisfy my curiosity. But that night, lying in the guest room, I couldn't stop thinking about how strange it felt up there. I'd been in plenty of rundown places, but this one had a weight to it, like the air inside was heavier than outside. The next evening, I told Jeremy I wanted to test something. I set up my old field recorder inside the treehouse, an audio recorder I'd used in college for sound design. It was nothing fancy, just sensitive enough to pick up faint wildlife. I wanted to see what kind of night sounds came through. We left it running overnight and planned to check it the next morning.
I wasn't expecting anything interesting, maybe some owl hoots or wind hitting the tree, but when I played back the recording the next day, something stopped me cold.
It didn't sound like it came from far away. It sounded like it was right there inside the treehouse. I replayed the section 3 times, just to be sure. It wasn't distortion or an animal. It was a child, and they were crying softly. No words, just quiet sobs that rose and fell. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but there was no mistaking the tone. Jeremy stood behind me, arms crossed, listening closely. After a few seconds, he stepped away and said, "I told you it fell off up there." I asked if any kids lived nearby, and he shook his head. The nearest house with children was over a quarter-mile away. I checked the recorder's position on the waveform. The mic had picked up the crying clearly, which meant it wasn't from outside. Whatever made the sound had been near the recorder, maybe a foot or two away. At most, I couldn't shake how sad it sounded. I went back up to the treehouse that afternoon, more cautious this time. I checked every corner, lifted old planks and knocked around for hidden compartments. Nothing. No toys, no bedding, no signs anyone had been there, just stale air and soft creaks from the wind. Before leaving, I set the recorder again. Same position, same settings. Jeremy said he didn't want anything to do with it. I stayed up late that night, staring at the backyard from the guest room window. Around 2:11 a.m., I noticed something odd. The motion light above the garage flickered on, then off again. No animals, no people, just the empty yard. I waited watching the tree line, and then for maybe half a second, I saw movement on the rope ladder. It swayed once, like someone had just climbed up. The next morning, I grabbed the recorder with shaking hands. I didn't listen to it until I was back inside, doors locked, sun high in the sky. This time the crying started sooner, right around 1:55 a.m., and it sounded closer, louder, still no words, but deeper sobs. Then something new happened. There was a knock, just one, but sharp and sudden, like someone tapping on the recorder itself. I paused the playback and rewound it, playing that part 3 times. Each time, it made the hairs on my arms stand up. I wanted to believe it was Jeremy, messing with me. But he looked genuinely shaken. When I told him what I heard, he didn't even ask to listen. He just said, "You should stop going up there." I told him I would, but I didn't. They went back one last time. The next night. This time I brought a camping chair and sat in the yard with my flashlight and headphones. I had the recorder set again in the treehouse. I wanted to hear it live. If anything happened again, I thought maybe I was imagining things. Initially only the wind stirred, occasionally rustling leaves, and an owl hooted in the distance. I noted it down, marking the time around 50 a.m. That's when I began to hear a soft scratching in my headphones, not on the microphone itself, but as if something was lightly brushing past it. At 1:48 a.m. the crying began again. This time, it was different. The sobs were broken up by gasps, like the child was struggling to breathe between cries. I turned up the volume slightly, hands shaking. The sound was so vivid, It felt like the kid was inches from the mic. I almost called out instinctively. Then something whispered, not the child, a second voice. It was low, raspy, and completely unintelligible, like it wasn't speaking English at all. I pulled the headphones off and stared at the treehouse. My flashlight was still pointed at it, and for a split second, I thought I saw something move inside. I didn't go up that night. I just packed everything and went back inside. Jeremy was already awake. He didn't ask what happened. I told him I'd delete the files. He nodded and didn't say anything else. The next day, I left for home early. Back in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about the crying. It wasn't just that it was out of place. What I heard made my chest tighten. It was the crying again. Same child, same treehouse, except I hadn't recorded anything. That night, I deleted the folder and shut my laptop. That was 2 months ago. Jeremy texted me last week saying he was having trouble selling the house. He didn't say why, but I didn't ask. We haven't talked about the treehouse since, but sometimes around 2 hours on AM, I swear I hear something in my hallway, just a small sound, a sob, then silence. When I was 13, I started noticing my older brother Ryan sneaking out late at night. It wasn't every night, but enough that I knew it wasn't random. He always left after everyone else was asleep. Usually sometime between midnight and 1, I'd hear the back door click, then silence. At first I thought he had a girlfriend, or maybe he was meeting friends, but he never left the yard. I know, because I followed him one night, tiptoeing through the hallway and peeking from the kitchen window. He was just standing there, staring up at the treehouse. It had been in our backyard since before we moved in, a crooked 2-level thing, built into a dying maple tree. I had only gone inside once, and hated it. The floor slanted, the windows were nailed shut, and it smelled like something rotting lived in the walls. Ryan, though, started going in every night. I asked him about it once. He didn't get mad, but he gave me this weird smile and said, "It needs me." Then he walked away, like that was a normal thing to say. I asked my parents if they knew what he was doing out there. They just said he was probably being creative. Ryan wasn't the creative type. He was quiet, barely talked to anyone, and didn't like being outside during the day. But now he spent hours in that rotting box in the middle of the night, always alone. I stopped asking questions after he started locking the backyard gate. Then, one night, the light in my room flickered and went out. When I looked out the window, I could see a faint orange glow coming from the treehouse. It didn't make sense. There was no power out there, and we hadn't owned lanterns since camping trips years ago. I couldn't sleep. I stayed by the window until the glow disappeared. Maybe 2 hours later, the next morning, I asked Ryan if he brought a flashlight or something up there. He didn't even blink. He just said, I didn't need one. Then he shut his bedroom door in my face. I started timing him, writing down exactly when he left. And when he came back, the pattern didn't make sense. Some nights he stayed out for just 20 minutes. Others he didn't return until dawn. But every single time, he came back, looking a little more exhausted. One night I saw him limping. The limp wasn't bad, just a slight drag in his right foot, but I noticed it immediately. He avoided eye contact at breakfast and wouldn't say a word. My parents were clueless, as usual, buried in work calls and emails. That same afternoon, I went out to the treehouse while he was still at school. The ladder creaked under my weight. The bark around it, soft and flaking inside the air, felt heavier than I remembered. The place was a mess. Bits of string tied to nails, pages torn from books and stapled into the walls. I saw a broken wristwatch in one corner, still ticking a shoelace, knotted into the shape of a star hung from the ceiling beam. I didn't understand any of it. I heard a soft creak behind me and nearly fell over, but no one was there.
I climbed down fast, heart pounding, and pretended I hadn't gone up at all that night.
Ryan didn't come to dinner. His door was locked, and the light under it never turned off. I asked if he was sick. My mom said, "He just needs space. He's growing up." That was the last real conversation we had about him. Over the next few days, he stopped speaking to me completely. I set my phone on the windowsill and hit record just before the light appeared. When I played it back the next morning, most of it was silence, but around the 1 hour mark, I heard whispering. It wasn't Ryan's voice. It sounded younger. There were words I couldn't make out, and then something louder like wood snapping than nothing. Just the sound of wind and insects. Again, Ryan didn't come back that night. My mom assumed he went to a friend's I knew better at sunrise. I went out to the treehouse. The ladder was gone. Not broken, not fallen, just gone, like it had never been attached. The bark where it once hung was stripped, clean, smooth, like it had been peeled by hand. The inside was even worse. It was completely empty. The pages, the strings, even the broken watch were gone. Every surface looked cleaner than before, like it had been scrubbed down with something rough. The walls were bare, and the air smelled faintly sweet, like old fruit left too long in the sun. I backed out slowly, watching every corner. I didn't tell my parents. I just waited, hoping Ryan would come back through the door like nothing had happened. But 3 days passed, and no one heard from him. My mom started calling friends and old classmates. My dad finally checked the police station. No one reported seeing him. His school said he hadn't been in class all week. When I looked, there was nothing outside, just the backyard and that crooked tree. But the treehouse, the orange light, was back. The ladder was back too. It dangled in place, like it had never disappeared. I didn't want to go near it, but something inside me needed to. I stepped out barefoot, shaking, and crossed the yard without thinking. The closer I got, the more I noticed something different. The light wasn't just glowing anymore. It was pulsing like it was breathing. I climbed halfway before stopping. I could hear someone whispering my name softly and rhythmically. Just my name, nothing else. It wasn't Ryan. I know my brother's voice. This one was higher, like a child mimicking him. I climbed down and ran inside. The next morning, I told my mom. Ryan came back.
I lied. I just needed her to stop worrying so I could figure things out. I went through Ryan's closet and found a notebook tucked in his old backpack. It wasn't full of writing, just one phrase over and over. The treehouse needs me. It's been 2 weeks now. The light hasn't come back, and the ladder hasn't returned either.
My parents think he ran away. They started packing up his things yesterday. But I don't think he's gone. Not really. I think he's still in there somewhere deeper than wooden nails. Some nights I hear it, call my name again. Not loud, just enough to keep me awake.
When I was a kid, there were certain sounds you just got used to. Screen doors creaking, shut the hum of the fridge, the soft patter of rain on the roof. But one night I heard something different, a voice quiet like a whisper meant for someone else. It was coming from the treehouse behind our house. At first I thought maybe a neighbor's kid had wandered into our yard, but when I looked out the window, I saw my little sister Lily sitting up there talking to someone. Not playing, pretend, talking, pausing, laughing at things I couldn't hear. I remember the way her flashlight flickered against the wood, the way her head tilted like she was listening. It made my stomach twist. We hadn't used that tree house in years, and Lily, She never played outside alone. Until that week, I waited for her to come inside and asked who she'd been talking to. She looked at me like I was dumb, Daniel. She said he lives up there now. Then she walked off calm as anything, humming to herself like it was totally normal. That name hit weird, Daniel. I didn't know anyone by that name, not in our neighborhood, not in her class. I asked Mom and she went pale for a second. Then she brushed it off and told me to stop encouraging Lily's stories. The next day, I searched online, half expecting nothing. But there it was. In 1994, a boy named Daniel Myers died in the treehouse behind our house. He fell from the top rung and landed on a rock. He was 8. The article said it was ruled an accident. I didn't tell Lily what I found. I just started paying closer attention. Every evening around 7, she grabbed a book or snack and climbed up like it was part of her schedule. Sometimes she stayed 30 minutes, sometimes 2 hours. One evening I sat under the treehouse while she was up there. I couldn't hear a second voice, but she kept nodding, laughing, even pausing like she was being interrupted. It was eerie. I didn't move until she climbed down and noticed me. "You shouldn't spy on him," she whispered. Then she looked back up and added, "He doesn't like that." And that was the first time I felt something like fear, not for her, but for myself. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house felt sharper, like it was cutting through the walls around 2 a.m. I heard footsteps on the porch roof right beneath the treehouse. I told myself it was wind, but it didn't sound like wind. The next morning, Lily didn't speak much. She just stirred her cereal and stared at the fridge like it had something written on it. When I asked if she was okay, Lily replied, "Daniel doesn't like being forgotten." She then inquired if we had any blue jackets. Later that afternoon, while Lily was at school, I ascended to the treehouse. The wood creaked beneath my weight, but everything else appeared untouched. There was a spot in the corner where she had placed a toy, an old stuffed rabbit I hadn't seen in years. The toy had something tucked beneath it. One of Lily's drawings. I unfolded it slowly. It showed her standing next to a boy with no face, only hands with far too many fingers. The word Daniel was written in the corner, in shaky, uneven letters. I brought it inside and showed it to my mom. She turned pale again, her lips tightening. "She's imaginative," she said, but her voice didn't sound convincing. I asked if she remembered anything about the family who lived here before us. She said she never met them. Later that night, I woke up to a sound like whispering. I checked Lily's room empty. I ran outside and spotted her in the treehouse, sitting perfectly still, not speaking, just staring straight ahead. The flashlight was off. There was no light at all. I called her name softly, and her head turned like she'd been in a trance. She didn't say anything, just climbed down and walked past me without a word. I watched her go inside, unsure whether to follow or stay out there. I climbed up just to see what she'd been looking at. The inside was cold, colder than outside, and still the stuffed rabbit was gone. In its place was a drawing I hadn't seen before. It showed just the treehouse drawn in black crayon, with a figure inside. The figure had long reaching arms that stretched beyond the frame. I came back down and stayed in the kitchen until morning. Lily didn't mention it. She just got ready for school, like nothing happened. But before she left, she said something that stuck with me ever since. Daniel wants someone new. Now after school. Lily didn't go outside like she usually did. She stayed in her room quiet, like she knew something had changed. I watched the tree house from the kitchen window, even though no one was in it. I felt like something was watching back. Around 7 p.m., the porch light flickered once, then went out. The treehouse was barely visible. Now in the fading daylight, that's when I saw something move near the top window. Just a quick shift in the shadows. Too fast to be the wind. I grabbed my phone and walked out, heart pounding, but not thinking clearly.
I climbed halfway up the ladder before stopping. Something about the air changed, like it got heavier all at once. I waited, holding my breath, until the tree creaked behind me. I climbed the rest of the way and stepped inside. It was dark and quiet, except for the faint sound of something brushing against the wood.
I turned on my flashlight and swept it across the space. There were drawings, new ones, pinned all over the walls. They weren't lilies. The lines were too shaky, like they'd been drawn by someone much younger, or someone who had trouble remembering how to hold a pencil. One drawing showed me standing under the treehouse, with no eyes. Another showed the inside of my room. I backed away slowly. Not sure why. I felt like I wasn't alone. Then I heard whispering so close, it could have been inside my head, just 3 words, barely above a breath. It's your turn. I left the flashlight behind and climbed down as fast as I could. That night I locked my door. I barely slept, and when I did, I dreamed of long arms reaching through my window. The next morning, Lily was back to normal, eating cereal, humming to herself, and never mentioning the treehouse again. She hasn't gone up since, but I have not often, maybe once a week without even realizing it. I wake up in the morning, and my feet are dirty. One time I found pine needles in my sheets. Another time, my phone had a voice memo saved with just quiet breathing for 6 minutes. I don't know what Daniel is. I don't think he's a ghost. Exactly. He feels like something older, something that attaches to people and waits. And lately, I think he's been waiting for me to stop resisting, because last night I found a new drawing on my desk. It was the treehouse again, and this time I was already inside it.